All righty. Welcome in, football fans. Welcome in. Jason and I coming at you guys on the YouTube live stream here tonight. Week 1 in the NFL has passed already. The season will pass us before we even know it. And week 1 passed. And unfortunately, there was a lot of storylines, obviously, Jason, but probably didn't end the way we wanted to, closing out yesterday. But overall, I'm pretty excited to get things going with our little series we have going on here. Obviously, we did the preview episode. I posted on the Apple Podcast channel. You posted on your YouTube channel, kind of getting the folks ready and maybe a little prepared of what they're going to hear from us on a weekly basis this NFL season. And that kind of being said, I guess to get those that maybe missed it, I see we already got a viewer tuning in. Blake, I appreciate you tuning in, buddy. I think a few people are waiting for my rant probably on the Bills, and we will save that for later, folks. But the plan for Jason and I this season is kind of to go every Tuesday nights around, I would say, around 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time, obviously where Jason and maybe a few of his listeners may be tuning in from tonight. Jason and I will be live every Tuesday throughout the NFL season. Pretty much, recapping all things NFL, talking about the biggest storylines, some of the biggest games that maybe Jason and I think throughout those certain weeks or specific weeks, and kind of just having a really good conversation about the NFL as a whole. And then obviously I know Jason is wearing the Stafford Detroit Lions jersey tonight, but as you can see over his left shoulder, he is a Bills fan by heart. We will be ending the show on most nights kind of talking about the Buffalo Bills and kind of how their game went in that certain week. So to get things going tonight, we will probably be, recording on a weekly basis around, maybe 60 to 90 minutes, anywhere between there. Try to get through, kind of I guess to fill folks in is kind of what Jason and I have thought of is to go on kind of recapping the Thursday night game, maybe a game during the early slate of games, the afternoon slate of games, and then the Sunday night game as well as the Monday night game, and then some Bills talk. So, overall maybe 60, 90 minutes of some hopefully good NFL talk on a weekly basis from Jason and I. So as I bring my co-host in here on a weekly basis, Jason, how you doing tonight, buddy? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Cole. Really excited to talk some NFL football. NFL season is back. Really excited for it. Honestly, just a really interesting week of games. I think that we didn't really have too many, spectacular finishes. I think that was one thing I took away from the week, other than maybe the Thursday nighter. I thought that was a really shocking game when Detroit was able to hold on and beat Kansas City. Obviously, that was a shocking result to begin the season, but I think the Miami Chargers game was good. We'll get into that one later, but I think overall my big takeaway is that the big quarterback.
Jason, I believe I actually have lost Jason here, if I'm not being mistaken. So as I take over, hopefully Jason's able to fix his mic issues there. But I think what he was trying to say is just overall, getting into the shocking first game of the season in the Thursday night game with the Detroit Lions. I don't know if I'd quite say upsetting the Kansas City Chiefs because obviously, the NFL put them on the season kickoff game for a reason. Had a lot of expectations, a lot of high hopes for the Detroit Lions. And ultimately, they kind of proved that they should have been in that spotlight. So overall, in week 1, it was, we had some upsets. I don't know if Jason was going to go there, but we had obviously the Joe Burrow 82-yard passing game against the Cleveland Browns. As I bring Jason back in, hopefully we're able to hear Jason once again. Jason, can I hear you, buddy? No, I don't think I got you quite yet, Jason. Yep, no worries, Jason. So, as I was saying, the Joe Burrow, and I know it's going to sound a little bit critical of me being the Bills fan, and after the performance that Josh Allen had yesterday, Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals offense struggle. 82 passing yards, I believe, from Joe Burrow. What was it? 14 to 31, 82 passing yards. Personally, I'm not too sure of how many people out there in the fantasy community had T. Higgins. I speak as one of them. He put up 0 points. I believe he was held catchless on 8 targets, something like that. The Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow struggle out of the gate. And maybe that was a little bit to be expected, to be honest, with Joe Burrow missing a lot of training camp. I don't believe he took a snap in the preseason. So, I don't know if I want to say rust. I don't know if I necessarily believe in rust. But Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals really didn't start out the season too hot, if I don't say so myself. And if we get into a few other games, not to get into too many, I guess this is maybe where I could give maybe a rundown of kind of week one as a whole, and we'll go through the scores before Jason gets back in here and hopefully is able to join me properly. So starting with the Browns upsetting the Bengals at home 24-3, shocking fashion with that 24-3 score. Maybe I could have seen a 24-23 score somewhere around there, where it was a little bit closer, where the Cincinnati Bengals offense was actually alive, but 24-3, how it didn't appear that the Cincinnati Bengals offense showed up whatsoever. Jason, do we got you now, buddy?
Do you hear me?
We got you, buddy. We have a green light.
Yep, just had to change my mic here. I changed it to the default internal mic here, so hopefully it'll work well from here. But I was saying the big storyline from this week is that Mahomes, Burrow, and Allen all lost, and those are seen as really the top 3 quarterbacks in the AFC. And I mean, we'll see how that storyline develops in the coming weeks here with all 3 teams facing some interesting opponents next week. I think KC plays against Jacksonville. I think Cincinnati plays against Baltimore, and then we're at home against the Raiders. So it should be interesting to see how that storyline plays out as we go forward here. And I'm interested to see what happens going forward this season. As I was saying, I don't know if I got this part before I was cutting out, but I was saying that there wasn't too many spectacular games this week. I thought there was really that Chargers-Miami game was really the highlight game, but I think in terms of close finishes, there weren't too many of them this week, but I'm sure that'll pick up because the NFL always delivers as the season goes on.
It does indeed. So, folks, those that are tuning in, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Please, if those that are tuning in on either one of Jason and I's channels, feel free to support the other, or we encourage you to support the other channel. Subscribe to either of Jason or I's channel if you are not already. A quick reminder that I am on the road to 100 subscribers, folks. So feel free to subscribe quickly so that you don't have to hear me until, maybe 200 subscribers, something like that. So we appreciate all the support. And Jason, I guess let's get into it, buddy. Let's get into Thursday Night Football, kickoff game of the 2023 NFL season. When kind of you were trying to go through the technical difficulties there, I mentioned I'm not too sure if I would go as far to call it an upset, because Detroit was rightfully placed in the spotlight game, the kickoff game of the season, right? Usually that's kind of the Super Bowl champs open up against. Usually it's a rematch of the Super Bowl, or some of the young and up and coming teams. Obviously, Bills fans are quite aware last year we were kind of thrust into that spotlight playing on opening night against the LA Rams coming off the Super Bowl. So I don't know if I'd go as far to say as an upset, and especially with missing Chris Jones, missing Travis Kelce. I wouldn't go as far to say as what I believe Mike Tirico that called the game. I believe he to close the game, I believe he said there was an asterisk on this game because of Travis Kelce and Chris Jones not being in the game. I don't really believe in that opinion, although I do think that those players, obviously, as great as they are, right, they might have had a change of outcome on the game, but just I think that's really unfair because you could say that about if Mahomes wasn't there, they don't win the Super Bowl last year or something like that, right? So the ifs, ands, or buts, I really feel like are kind of disqualified when it comes to that conversation. And Jason, you got the Detroit Lions jersey on, buddy. How are you kind of feeling watching that game on Thursday?
Well, I went to school in Windsor, Ontario, which is, of course, right across the border from Detroit. And so the Lions, while I was living down there, really became my second favorite team. And I saw plenty of heartbreaking losses even during the 4 years that I was there and the 15 years that I've watched the NFL. I've seen them go through a lot of losses that, were quite heartbreaking. But I think that this is the single biggest victory that I've ever seen with my own eyes the Lions have. They've played in some playoff games. They've won some dramatic games, but in this spotlight on this stage against that quality of an opponent, I think that was really, really impressive. Despite like Kelsey and Jones missing, I think that you can't take anything away from the Lions because injuries are part of the game of football. There are going to be players missing from every team. And I mean, it just so happens that two of the Chiefs' three best players arguably were missing in this game. But I think at the end of the day, I think the Lions defense, I think, is the big story in this one. How well that they played. Aiden Hutchinson looks like an absolute beast here in year two. Brian Branch, I believe it is, in the secondary. He looked excellent as a potential star rookie back there for a Lions secondary that really needed it after having a poor performance throughout last season. So I thought that was the big story in this one. Really, both defenses. I thought that the Chiefs defense actually held up the Lions more than I thought they would as well. So I think that is really interesting considering that they're missing Chris Jones as well. So I think the defense is playing a big role in that game was a big story for me. And ultimately, I mean, the Chiefs made a lot of mistakes. I mean, we'll get into it. Kadarius Toney having perhaps one of the worst receiving games we've ever seen an NFL receiver have. I mean, I think T. Higgins also went without a reception this week. So it was a weird receiving week for some of these receivers in the league. But I mean, at the end of the day, really impressive win for the Detroit Lions, and you can't take anything away from them.
Yes, Jason. And I don't know if you forgot to mention or not, but I don't know if I want to call it something that happened, I believe, on the second drive of the game. MCDC pulling out, a pretty gutsy call. I believe he inside of his own 20-yard line, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if he signed off on it, if it was the special teams coordinator's call, or kind of what the communication was on that one. But the Detroit Lions faked the punt inside their own 20-yard line. I want to say it was on their second possession of the game, early on, or maybe somewhere in the middle of the first quarter. A really gutsy, ballsy type gambling play like that. If you turn it over to Patrick Mahomes early like that, I would imagine he's probably getting 7. The dynamic of the game probably changes a little bit more. And just the momentum from there on out, I want to say kind of, I don't know if it was totally on the Detroit Lions side, because I'm sure as even Detroit Lions fans giving the ball back to, I want to say Patrick Mahomes got the ball with, I think it was over 2 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. It was around 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. I would imagine, especially Bills fans as well, knowing that it only took 13 seconds to go down and lead them to scoring points. I kind of thought, you know what, man, as bad as you mentioned, some of the skill position players played. Some of them really let down Patrick Mahomes in that offense on Thursday night, but it almost was all erased in one possession if they went down and scored, right? But obviously the Detroit Lions held their end of the bargain and kind of bow up and ultimately pull off the I would say an impressive win over the Kansas City Chiefs. Ultimately, this isn't the Kansas City Chiefs that probably we will see come playoff time, barring any injuries. Obviously, like you said, injuries are a part of football, but I would expect Travis Kelce and obviously Chris Jones signing the extension. I believe it was yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. How timely is that, folks? Hey, they lose on Thursday. Next week, Chris Jones signed, sealed, and delivered to Chiefs Kingdom. I don't know if I want to say that they missed him by any means, because it seemed like they were getting a little bit of pressure as well there early on Goff and the Detroit Lions. It kind of seemed like, although it was a little bit of a slow slugger kind of sluggernaut battle back and forth, it just felt like the Lions really didn't be able to take full of opportunity like that they probably wanted to, with kind of the Chiefs not really exploding that the way that I feel like we're accustomed to seeing them on a weekly basis. And Jason, I think something else that you didn't talk about, and something that I'd be curious about for anybody that's listening in the comments tonight, comment down below what you guys were kind of saying to yourself, or maybe saying amongst your peers that you guys are watching the games with in your rooms. How early did you pick up on Jawan Taylor totally being offside, and JJ Watt? I'm not too sure if you followed JJ Watt on Twitter. He did a nice little video on Twitter at halftime. He said, "You know what? I don't blame him at all for leaving the snap early. D linemen try to time the snap all the time. He's just trying to do that to the best of his advantage, right? He's trying to get the best competitive advantage for his team. But I almost blame the refs more so than Jawan Taylor at that point, right? Because he's only going to do with what he's getting allowed to do with, right? So if the refs, I think it was I forget who called the game. Joe Buck? I forget who was on the call anyways, but he mentioned if one of the refs just threw a flag there early in the first second quarter, Orlando Brown, Jawan Taylor's thinking about that a little bit more, and potentially it's not as talked about as I think it kind of got. So I'm curious, when did you pick up on the kind of Jawan Taylor kind of situation?
Well, I think it was like probably like early in the second half that I started noticing it a lot. I think then it started to get a lot of attention over on social media because it wasn't even close. Like it wasn't even close how far he was lining up back. Like he didn't even try to hide it really, and the refs were just kind of blind for. And I think the biggest thing is that the broadcast was even talking about it before the refs even started to enforce it. And I think, and the refs didn't really even enforce it the entire game. He just so happened to get a couple of crucial penalties at the end of the game that ultimately really cost his team late in this one. And I think that was also one of those penalties was on the final drive as well. So, I mean, totally against the rules, but he got his in the end.
Yeah, it's pretty funny how ironic it is that on the last Chiefs drive, everybody's complaining because, like yourself, Jason, I wasn't really paying too much attention to the right tackle of the Kansas City Chiefs, so I didn't really see it until I got into social media around halftime, maybe second quarter, somewhere around there. I saw that everybody was freaking out. I was kind of curious, so I kept my eyes on it too, and I was blown away with it wasn't even close, like you mentioned. And like I said, the jump in the snap count, I really kind of chalked it up to competitive advantage more so than cheating, if that's what you want to call it. So it was just an interesting situation, and it's kind of glad, like you mentioned, he got his in the end. Came out to cost his team in the final drive, like you mentioned, in a penalty that stalled their final possession, not getting points and sending the game further, or giving their team a better opportunity to win the game overall. So, Jason, I guess let's close things out on the Thursday night football game. Any final thoughts when it comes to the Detroit Lions beating the Kansas City Chiefs?
Well, I think that, it was one thing for them to win this week, but it also really helped the Vikings lost on Sunday in a really surprising game. I thought that they were going to beat the Bucs. I mean, we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we talk about that game, but I mean, I think that's a really good sign for the Lions going forward, because I think the big thing for them this year is I really want them to win this division. They have not won, like they made a playoff appearances, I think, like 4 or 5 times in the last, since 2000. But I think they haven't won the division since like 1993 or something like that, something crazy like that. So really hope they can accomplish that this season, and it's off to a good start.
Yeah, I know. I knew you'd be stoked about that, especially with you picking the Detroit Lions to win the division. I know ultimately I did go with the Minnesota Vikings to win the division, but I'm definitely in the corner of MCDC and the Detroit Lions. I love that guy. I would run through a wall. I couldn't imagine what his players, how motivated he gets his players on a weekly basis. So let's get into Sunday football. I would hope, as you all were able to enjoy a Sunday of football, 7 hours of commercial free, as Scott Hansen likes to say. Settle in on your couch, bed, wherever you may be watching football. Enjoy some red zone. Enjoy a football game or two. I know I sure did. And it was just really, I joked on Twitter. I'm going to be having an excuse that I'm busy on weekends, and I'm really not doing much, Jason. I'm really just sitting at home watching football, whether it be college football on Saturdays, CFL on Saturdays, Fridays, and NFL on Sundays. It's just a comforting feeling. The weather starts to get a little bit worse. I mentioned, it was raining over here on the West Coast, Jason. It's cloudy, you can kind of settle in after work. Hopefully there's a game on Monday night. If it's Thursday night CFL football, Thursday night NFL football, whatever it may be, you can kind of get in comfy into your couch or whatever, kind of enjoy some football. It's the best time of year, in my opinion, that kind of that fall, autumn, I guess, if you will, where it's still a little bit, it hovers around 15 degrees or something like that. It's still a little bit warmish, I would say, I guess, but just the best time of year. And let's get into the early slate of games Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Let's start, Jason, with, I mentioned Blake pulls up the comment. Burrow sucks. Let's start with the Browns upsetting the Cincinnati Bengals at home, 24-3. I mentioned Jason a little bit earlier. I don't know if you heard me. Joe Burrow, 14 of 31, 82 yards. You mentioned T. Higgins held catchless. I mentioned a little bit earlier ago, he had 8 targets, held catchless. Jason, I was, I don't know if I would say a proud fantasy owner, but T. Higgins was definitely in my lineup on Sunday afternoon, and it was definitely a disappointing afternoon. What was your overall thoughts? I would imagine maybe if you were you able to tune in live, but just what were your overall thoughts when you were paying attention to the game, and overall thoughts when you saw the final score?
Yeah, so I usually watch the Red Zone feed when the Bills aren't playing on Sundays. So that's what I was doing for this game. But obviously, I was paying more attention to this one than most of the 1 o'clock games. And the biggest shock to me was just how poor both of the quarterbacks played in this one. Yeah, sure, there was some inclement weather that probably caused a few footballs to hit the ground than otherwise would have. But I think at the end of the day, Watson and Burrow both really, really struggled in this one. And I think, the Bengals in particular, this is becoming a trend. Week ones, they have not came out of the gate very sharp at all. I mean, last year against Pittsburgh, obviously, I think he threw like 4 interceptions, I think, last year. And I think they actually started 0-2 last year, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think at the end of the day, the Bengals, it's becoming a trend, these slow starts to their seasons. And we'll have to see if it comes back to bite them more this year than it was last year. But I think, the Browns, they just show that they have a very, very strong defense when they can have all those pieces working together. Obviously, they have one of the most unstoppable defensive players in the NFL in Myles Garrett, which always gives any team an advantage to have that number one pass rusher. But they've picked very high in the draft for several years, and they have a lot of highly talented players back there, and it really showed in this one. And I'm interested to see the Browns going forward. But like I said, I wasn't overly impressed with Deshaun Watson in this one, so we'll have to see if he can get back to his old self going forward. But obviously, what we saw at the end of last year and compared to what we saw early in this one, I think that he hasn't really played that well so far. So we'll see how he does the rest of the season, if he can get back to that old level of play, like I said.
I think it should have been maybe a little bit expected. Obviously, Joe Burrow misses a majority of training camp, all of the preseason with, a calf injury. Obviously, I believe it was, what was it, Thursday night? He signs the big contract extension.
Yeah, I think it was during the game. Yeah, the Thursday night game.
He signs a big contract extension, right? I would imagine a lot of excitement, a lot going on in his mind. Not to really give him many excuses, but we'll get into it later. I fully expect Josh Allen to bounce back. I fully expect Joe Burrow to bounce back. They're both amongst, in my opinion, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, the top 3 best quarterbacks, however you want to list them, rank them. Personally, I don't care. I just think that they're all in the same tier. Maybe that's a little bit unfair conversation for Patrick Mahomes, seeing as that he's won a Super Bowl or 2, a couple MVPs. He's kind of maybe set himself apart from those 2 until maybe 1 or 2 of them, until one of them wins a Super Bowl. But I would say they're in the same conversation at least. And I would expect that, the struggles wouldn't last too long for Burrow and Allen, but we'll get into Allen a little bit later. How tough is the AFC North, right? You look at it, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, the Pittsburgh Steelers probably didn't start the season how they wanted to. A lot of preseason hype, but they are 0-1. The Browns upset the Bengals. Baltimore, I believe, rolled past
Houston.
Houston. As much as people want to talk about the AFC East being the hardest division in football, I would definitely argue that the AFC North is up there amongst the hardest divisions in football. I think if the rest of the AFC wasn't as tough, I would argue that they could have maybe 3 playoff teams with maybe a Cleveland or Pittsburgh getting in as a 7th seed. Ultimately, I think that Baltimore and Cincinnati get in, and maybe Pittsburgh and Cleveland are left on the inside looking out. But I think on a week out basis, obviously Mike Tomlin led team in the Pittsburgh Steelers. You can expect them to be a competitive bunch. Week 1 is probably just a write-off. In all honesty, usually that the Pittsburgh Steelers, when they come in, they come to compete. They play a physical brand of football. I want to say T.J. Watt had 3 sacks. He's as dominant as he's ever been. Well on pace to, I believe he said coming into the season that he wants to break the all-time sack record. This season, he's well on pace to do that with a 3-sack performance in week 1. But how tough is this division as you look at it from over top view, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's really hard when you looked at this division going into the season to pick a team that would finish last. I mean, you just really couldn't see a scenario because Pittsburgh's just never bad. I mean, Pittsburgh, the worst season they've had under Mike Tomlin, 9-8. So you don't expect them to be bad. I mean, Baltimore should be better considering Lamar's back healthy. Hopefully that stays the case the whole season because the last couple of seasons Lamar's been injured right at the end. So we'll see what happens with their season. They actually had a little bit of struggles in the first half against Houston, but then they were able to really take control of that game in the second half. So that was good to see. They'll probably get Odell Beckham more involved as the season goes along. So it's going to be interesting to see what element that adds to their offense. And then I think for Cleveland, like I said, it's all about getting Deshaun Watson back in terms of being that elite quarterback that he was a few years ago when he beat the Bills in that playoff game with Houston. So, I mean, with Cincinnati, we all know what they're capable of as well, obviously with pretty much almost 2 back-to-back Super Bowl appearances there. So I think at the end of the day, it's really tough to see who is going to win this division or finish last, really. So I think at the end of the day, we definitely could see 3 playoff teams from this division go to the playoffs because we like the AFC is tough, like you mentioned, but I think that the Jets, Aaron Rodgers injury, we'll talk about it later on, but he'll be out for the season, so that probably takes the Jets out of the mix. So maybe 3 teams from the North could make it this year. So really interested to see how that plays out. And one thing that stands out to me about the AFC North is that throughout the years, there's usually been divisions that have there'll be like one dominant team and they just roll over the divisional games like on any given year, like the Patriots when they ran that division, the Bills recently, not last year, but a couple years before, they were really dominating the games against the East. Against the AFC North, Baltimore and Pittsburgh dominated that division for years, but in those games against Cleveland, like it never felt like those were really tough games for Pittsburgh and Baltimore. So I think that division just has something about it. So it's going to be very interesting to see now that they all look like really good teams on paper, how it's going to play out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, something that, both Jason and I don't wish injury upon anybody, but I'm glad that you mentioned it, right? Obviously, Aaron Rodgers goes down. We got the news this morning that it is the Achilles out for the season. What's not to say, Lamar Jackson's done for the season or, Kenny Pickett's done for the season, whatever quarterback it may be in that division. I would think at this point, probably the underdogs, if you will, are probably the Cincinnati Bengals and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would think, Joe Burrow led Cincinnati Bengals, Lamar Jackson, Baltimore Ravens. Probably a lot more people are going to side towards those franchises more than the other. But, like I said, I don't wish injury upon anybody, right? But Joe Burrow did come into the season with a calf injury, right? Dealt with it all training camp, right? Maybe Joe Burrow goes down and maybe it's Cleveland's time, right? I do agree that I don't think Deshaun Watson had his best game. Weather did play a part, I think, into it, but maybe he does feel a little bit more or look a little bit more like the old Deshaun Watson after kind of, a full year back into football, an off season where he doesn't have to. I know he probably still has to deal with the slander here and there and the questions every once in a while, but not as much of a distraction this year, I would think. Probably a little bit more football questions when he's asked at training camp, those sort of things. So it's a little more on football more so than the outside noise and all that stuff for Deshaun Watson. So, I'm super interested to see how the AFC North plays out. Obviously, it's week 1, so everyone's overreacting. Oh my God, the Cleveland Browns are going to be in the running. But honestly, I like the recipe that they can kind of have. That they play that. I think that division as a whole plays December, January type football where you can kind of run the football, be aggressive on both, and kind of maybe your strengths of your team lie in both lines of the scrimmage, offensive line of scrimmage, defensive line of scrimmage, can kind of win the line of scrimmage on offense, get good pushes, run the ball, set up play action, that kind of thing. Defensive, you can kind of, like I mentioned, TJ Watt, 3 sacks already. Myles Garrett in that division, a few other guys on that Cincinnati Bengals defensive line. Just super interested to see how that division plays out. Shout out to my boy Cody Upton tuning in. Roll damn Todd, he says. Appreciate you for tuning in, buddy. Go Bills from my man David. Appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight. Let's start with our second game that we want to talk about during the early slate of games. And that was the Buccaneers beating the Minnesota Vikings 20-17, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, Jason?
Yep.
And Kirk Cousins, if you look at if you block out half of his stat line, 33 of 44, 344, and 2 touchdowns looks fairly impressive, right? Looks like he had a fairly good game. I will definitely admit I grew, as I mentioned on our preview episode, Jason, I grew a little bit of a soft spot for Kirk Cousins. During the quarterback documentary this past offseason, was definitely rooting for him, but he had, I want to say, 3 turnovers overall, 1 interception for sure, and I want to say 2 other fumbles. I want to say it was the fumbled snap and then the fumbled handoff, whether you want to place blame on the running back, center, wherever it may be. He was charged with 3 turnovers, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So ultimately, kind of, like we'll touch on with another quarterback later, probably a big reason to do with why his team didn't win the game ultimately. The Vikings fall 3 points short to the Baker Mayfield-led Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a new era, if you will, in Tampa. I guess, kind of, Jason, what are your overall thoughts? What's your first thought that jumps out of you about this game?
My first thought is that, wasn't Minnesota something like 10-0 in 1-score games last year, and they've already lost a 1-score game?
Yes, they were.
Yeah, so you could already see how that's kind of maybe regressing to the mean. Obviously, it's early, but they also have to go to Philly on Thursday. So, I mean, you could easily see the Vikings starting 0-2 here unless they come up with a big performance in that one. So, I think, like you mentioned, the turnovers were huge for the Vikings in this one. Yes, he had that muffed snap. I think that was pretty early in the game. But they had opportunities to make up for it, and they just couldn't really get too much going against that Tampa Bay defense that I didn't give enough credit in our season preview when I just kind of glossed over the Bucs and actually predicted them to finish last place in the NFC South. Baker actually was pretty okay in this game, but I think the biggest thing with him is that he avoided that big mistake. I think he didn't turn the ball over at all in this game, threw a couple of touchdown passes, didn't throw for a ton of yards, but didn't need to ultimately at the end of the day. So if he can play that style of football and the defense can play like this, Tampa Bay might be a team that can make some noise in that relatively weak NFC South this year. But like I said, in terms of the Vikings perspective, as it relates to the Lions, I think that this would be huge. This is huge for the Lions to already be a game up in week 1 of the season. Obviously, the Packers looked pretty good this weekend as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out going forward. But at the end of the day, that's just my initial thoughts on this game.
Yeah, so I'm glad you touched on it. I was going to ask you, can Baker lead this team to a division crown? Obviously, that you mentioned the weaker division. I have a little bit of higher hopes for the Saints in that division personally. But I think that the Buccaneers, with the roster that's assembled around them, that they have a I don't know if I want to say an underrated defense, but a capable defense. A lot of those guys, I don't know if I want to say a lot of those guys. A few of those guys were definitely on the Super Bowl roster, have Super Bowl experience, some high caliber players on that defense, right? Especially the linebacker position. I don't know. Can the Bucs compete? I really think it comes down to Baker Mayfield. Obviously, he finished with 21 of 34, 173, and 2 touchdowns. I think something that probably ultimately will probably solve our question of the or answer our question here is, can Baker take care of the football when it kind of comes to some of those one possession games, some of those possessions where maybe they it's a third and long, and maybe he feels like he needs to force it into some tighter coverage, interception, you don't get points on the board. And I think it'll come down to probably division record and how much they can take advantage of the weaker slate of games probably in that division. As you mentioned, right, a weaker division doesn't necessarily mean easier games, right? Division opponents, you see them twice a year. You tend to know them a little bit better. Those games are usually mean just for whatever reason, right? Even if it's the first place team in the division versus the fourth place team in the division, it means a little bit more, right? It's usually a little bit more personal if it's the second game. Usually you played, if you're the D tackle, you probably have a little bit of a beef with the right guard or something like that, right? Because you went against them for a whole game, right? So those kind of relationships are there, or maybe lack of relationships are there. So not to say that any division games are easy per se, but the opportunity is there for them to pick up some wins in the division and hopefully compete in that division. I think it comes down to the quarterback position. I'm curious, I guess, before we get out of this game, are you concerned long-term about Minnesota? I know you picked the Detroit Lions to win the division, but do you see kind of maybe a regression from the Minnesota Vikings this year?
I still had them as a playoff team, as a wild card team, but I mean, I think they're one of those teams that could go either way. I think that, yes, I likely still see them as a playoff team because of the weakness of the NFC. Just in general, there's not too many teams that I would, in general, pick over them. But I think at the end of the day, they're a team that does have flaws. A team that, their defense did not play well last season. Obviously, it's a brand new season, so we'll see how that plays out. And they played pretty well in this game against Baker and company. But I think that's something to look out for this season with them. I think that they're a team that, they lost Dalvin Cook in the offseason. I think Alexander Madison's a pretty good running back, but I think, running the ball may be something that's a little bit downgraded for them this year. They're a team that relies a lot on those play action bootlegs as well. So I'm interested to see how that plays out for them this year. Obviously, they arguably have the best wide receiver in the NFL, so they're not going to be a terrible offense by any stretch, but can they beat the truly elite teams? They're playing a first-place schedule this year, so I think that comes into play as well. So interested to see how they go the rest of the season. Obviously, like I mentioned before, they were like 10-0 in one-score games as well, so some of those are bound to go against them this year, so we'll see if they can create some more margin in terms of their victories this season.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. I still have high hopes for the Minnesota Vikings, but we will see. The Detroit Lions definitely got a lot tougher. What is it? Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears in that division as well. I like what I've seen from Jordan Love, as you mentioned, and who knows what you might see. But the Chicago Bears, I think, will be a competitive bunch for as much as people might laugh at them that they're the Bears, and I don't think that they might have a high win total per se, but I think that they'll be a little bit more of a pain in people's sides or team sides. Rather than most people would rather give them credit for. So to close out the morning slate of games, the San Francisco 49ers beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 30-7. The New Orleans Saints beat the Tennessee Titans 16-15. The Baltimore Ravens beat the Houston Texans 25-9. The Atlanta Falcons beat the Carolina Panthers 24-10. The Jacksonville Jaguars beat the Indianapolis Colts 31-21, and the Commanders beat the Arizona Cardinals 20-16. That leads us to the afternoon slate of games, Jason, and by far the best game, I would say, of the weekend of week one. We will not wait any longer. The Miami Dolphins beating the LA Chargers in a thriller. Jason, as a Bills fan, buddy, I can't not admit the Dolphins look like they're going to be a problem this year. I will definitely not downplay how scary they looked by any means. I guess I will let you go first before I maybe put a little bit of burst a little bit of their bubble. I feel like people are probably going to try to call me a hater, but what are your overall thoughts from the game? I think personally, quickly, I guess, quick little thought: the LA Chargers seem to always lose those like those thrillers, high scores, and they find some ways to like lose these games where they're I don't know if it's their defense that lets them down, whatever you want to say. Just weird things happen to the Chargers.
They charger it.
They charge it. But what are your overall thoughts from a Dolphins perspective? I guess before we maybe talk about the game as a whole.
Well, I think we knew that they were a very good team. Like, at points last year, they were arguably the most explosive offense in the NFL. The wide receiver combo that they have with Waddle and Tyreek Hill is just outstanding. And I don't think you could argue there's no combination in the league that really compares to that from especially like a speed and explosiveness perspective. I think that alone is what makes that team super scary. And now you got Tua being such an accurate quarterback. I mean, we saw that last year when he was on the field. Really, the big question I have for them is, can Tua stay healthy the rest of the season? Because I think, it's like we've seen such a high level of consistency from him when he's been on the field lately. So I'm pretty confident in saying that they are, a contender going forward. I think, whether or not they'll beat out the Bills for the division remains to be seen. But I think that team with that offense and some of the playmakers that they have on the defensive side as well is pretty impressive. I mean, what's his name? Is it Jalen Phillips they have on the defensive line?
Jalen Phillips,
yeah,
as well as Christian Wilkins.
Yep. Yeah, they have a very talented group up there on the defensive line. And I think at the end of the day, they have a roster that's capable of competing with anybody in the NFL. And we really saw that week one where they went to LA and won.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm not downplaying by any means, folks. I just I don't know, for whatever reason, I guess I have this confidence. I would definitely go as far as to say that I think I would definitely move the Miami Dolphins up into the tier as a contender to win the Super Bowl. I think their roster is that good. I think, and it'll I guess kind of sound like I am kind of being a little bit biased here, but I do think that the Miami Dolphins are more built for September, October, getting a home playoff game, playing at home in the nicer weather. Now, people will probably say that against about the Buffalo Bills, right? Which is very probably true in a lot of ways, right? I like probably the interior / run stopping ability of the Miami Dolphins, maybe a tad more than the Buffalo Bills, but they're both kind of lighter up front when it comes to defensive tackles outside of Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins is an absolute monster. Christian Wilkins is kind of in his own tier in this conversation when it comes to as bad as that sounds for Ed Oliver, because he is a high draft pick re-signed by the Bills in somewhat of a top-ish tier for D tackles, but not in Christian Wilkins tier. I just feel like they're a little bit lighter when it comes to run stopping, that kind of sort of thing. The trenches, the dirty sort of football when it comes to playoff time. Now, that being said, if Tua is able to stay healthy, I think he probably benefits long-term football more than maybe a Josh Allen, who maybe isn't able to stay on script as much as Tua is. It seems like Tua, if he's not being pressured as much as he is, he's really able to stay on rhythm, stay on scheme, keep the Dolphins ahead of schedule in manageable situations. And then Mike McDaniel's honestly kind of, I got to tip my cap to that guy. He's one hell of a play caller. He schemes the heck out of things. It seems, I don't know if it's just because Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are that fast, but it seems like they're absolutely butt-ass open on a weekly basis. And I'll go as far as to say 50-50. It's 50-50 that how fast they are, and 50-50 Mike McDaniel's scheme and how he's able to drop things. Probably I would imagine kind of benefit off one another. Maybe if they're on the same side, maybe if they cross where maybe the defense is worried about Tyreek Hill on one play, Jalen Waddle's one-on-one on another play, they benefit off of just the whole. I just like their scheme. Now that being said, I guess the LA Chargers, I guess to kind of bring this back to a whole conversation here about the game. They lose by 2. It was, I want to say, 36-34, right there. And it's funny that I feel like I'm kind of, I was high on the Chargers. I believe you didn't have the Chargers to finish in the playoffs this year, Jason. Did you? Or
I had them as my the 7th seed. I had the Dolphins missing it, actually.
Okay, so but I still have faith that the Chargers are gonna, be in the playoffs. But I don't know if I have faith in Chargers to win a playoff game. I like you mentioned, right? The Chargers always seem to charger, in big games. Last year, you think about how much they were up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They end up losing in a comeback. I don't know. I know it's week 1. Am I overreacting a little bit to the Chargers losing this game, Jason, or kind of just, what are your overall thoughts on the LA Chargers long term?
I mean, I guess maybe a little bit like a tad overreacting, but I think it's natural given the history of this franchise. I mean, I go back to like years ago. Like I think there was one year they had the number 1 ranked offense and the number 1 ranked defense in terms of yards on both sides of the ball, and they still missed the playoffs. Like just weird things seem to happen to this organization. Obviously, that weird scenario with the Raiders 2 years ago that they could have tied and both made the playoffs, and they decided to call a timeout and ultimately ended up costing them the playoffs, and then the 24-point blown lead last year. So, I mean, weird things seem to happen to the Chargers, and I mean, I really don't have any faith in them, like really any of these seasons, being able to win the division over the Chiefs, which is ultimately your easiest path to win the Super Bowl, is to win your division, have that first game at home. And, it's really hard if you have to go on the road for all of your playoff games to make it to the Super Bowl. So I think at the end of the day, the Chargers are facing an uphill battle from that perspective. But I do think they're still one of the better offenses in the league. I think they have, a lot of talent defensively, a good pass rush duo there. Obviously with not Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa. I always get those two confused. But I think at the end of the day, it's still a very talented team. But given the history of the franchise, it's you're right to be concerned a little bit about them.
Yes. So, it was overall, though, it was a very exciting game. Personally, I just, I guess I don't even know if I want to share my secrets out there, Jason. I guess I will. Betting wise, I can't lie this week, folks, and maybe this is why I lost. I hammered the Miami Dolphins on every bet that I had. One, because they were underdogs, but I really wholeheartedly thought that because I bet on them that the Chargers would win, just to kind of stick it to me, and they ultimately stuck it to me because the Miami Dolphins won, and it just I don't want to admit it, but the Miami Dolphins, folks, are an absolute problem for the NFL, for the Buffalo Bills, for the Kansas City Chiefs, whoever's in the AFC, for whoever's in the NFL as a whole. This coming season, if Tua's able to stay healthy, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are absolutely unflippin' believable. Before I guess we skip it, Tyreek Hill, 11 receptions, 215 yards. Yes, 215 yards. This is not a video game, folks. 200 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns. 11 receptions, 215, and 2 touchdowns to start the year. I was watching the Vikings game earlier in the morning. I believe Justin Jefferson had like 50 or something like that, north of 150, I want to say. And I'm just like sitting back to myself, business as usual for Justin Jefferson. He's the best in the league. Sure wish I was drafting first overall in fantasy, so I had him. And then Tyreek Hill, it's those guys are, in my opinion, Justin Jefferson number 1, Tyreek Hill number 2 for best 1-2 receivers in the CFL, in the entire NFL. And personally, I think they're in their own tier when it comes to receivers. I think maybe obviously I mentioned Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, a few of the other guys maybe that are up there. I really think Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, there's no other guys that are doing it like them this in the past few seasons. And I believe Tyreek Hill said 2,000 yards he wanted to have receiving this year coming into the season. Honestly, man, if he's able to stay healthy, if Tua is able to stay healthy, I do not put it past him. Those guys are so freaking fast, and they're able to just take advantage. It doesn't matter if you're able to stay, in zone, if you're so far back, if you're in man, hip to hip with them, they're just able to get that little bit of separation or a lot of separation and make you look bad. They are a problem, folks. Clip it, Noah, if you want to clip it now. I know he's not viewing it. He's at practice, but as much as I don't want to admit it, It pains me to admit it for sure. The Miami Dolphins are an absolute problem this year in the NFL. That is if Tua Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill, kind of those guys, obviously they already did, as scary as it sounds, Jalen Ramsey. They don't even have Jalen Ramsey right now, which is kind of crazy to think about. But, outside of, not to kind of downplay maybe Christian Wilkins, but, if they were to lose maybe a Christian Wilkins, Javon Holland, a Jalen Phillips, something like that, I think that, the offense could kind of pick up the slack, win some of those shootouts, those really high-thrilling games. I think if they lose some of those offensive weapons, maybe even a left tackle, maybe a right tackle, I'm not too sure. But I can't think of left tackle, right tackle off by heart. But, any left tackle, right tackle is super important. Any offensive lineman in general is super important to the kind of outcome of a team success. But the Miami Dolphins are going to be in the conversation when it comes to January football leading into February football, no matter what. So to close out, I guess, the 1:00 game, Jason, anything that comes to mind when it comes to that game?
No, I think you hit on pretty much everything there.
Okay, buddy. So close out the afternoon slate of games. Packers beat the Chicago Bears 38-20. The Las Vegas Raiders beat the Denver Broncos 17-16. The Eagles beat the Patriots 25-20, which is in a weird one. The Eagles jumped out on the Patriots. I'm not too sure if they felt bad because Tom Brady was having a special moment at halftime.
That's what I was going to say.
I had to take a quick little jab at the Patriots, of course, but the Rams beating the Seahawks 30-13, closing out the afternoon. The Dolphins winning a thriller 36-34 over the Chargers, and that led us into Sunday Night Football. Jason, I have a little routine. Shout out to my boys. Sunday Night Football, I get together for the last, I want to say 3 years with a few of my good buddies. I want to say 4 or 5 of us. We get together with a buddy of mine that just lives up the street. We have a good time kind of watching the game together on Sunday Night Football, made kind of a routine, a ritual. We're all excited. Actually, one of our friends actually is a New York Giants fan. Actually, funny enough, he's coming home from Vancouver. He's racing home to come join us. We pick him up. I want to say he joined us at around halftime. Didn't check the score, I think, till after the first quarter. It was unfortunately a tough night for him. Shout out to Aussie. Hopefully you're able to listen to this at some point, buddy, or just shout out to you in general. All excited to watch the game after all Sunday football, go hang out with the boys, talk about fantasy, all that sort of thing. And it was over very fast. And the Dallas Cowboys blew out the New York Giants 40-0, folks. What were your kind of thoughts watching this game? Obviously, it didn't seem too dominant because of the way that, the Dallas Cowboys scored. I want to say they got a defensive touchdown. Their defense, I want to say, had like 40 fantasy points or something like that. Just what were your overall thoughts watching this massacre?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that the Cowboys won. I think Dak has won something crazy, like 12 games in a row against the Giants at this point. So, I mean, I wasn't surprised that the Cowboys have won because they've dominated this series in recent memory. But I think at the end of the day, just the fashion in which this game played out, the Giants go down to have a promising first possession, and then I believe they get a blocked field goal that they get a big return on, and ultimately that's really all the Cowboys needed. It was really a dominant performance from that defense, and I think something that you alluded to on the season preview, you were saying that the NFC likely is going to come down to, for you, the teams that can play both sides of the ball, because there's a lot of teams that are very offensive heavy or really defensive heavy in the NFC, and you were saying the Cowboys and the 49ers are the teams that could really do both. And I think the Cowboys really showed that in this game. Micah Parsons, he could be a generational type defensive player. Like, he is that good. And there's the ability to switch positions, and just the fact that he was a linebacker coming in and then they switched him to defensive end. I mean, just incredible versatility from that guy and his ability to do everything for that defense. It just makes everybody's job around him easier. So I think at the end of the day, that's my big takeaway. The Cowboys defense, really, this started last year. They had a really good string of games defensively last year, but I think coming out with just this ultimately like a statement win here in week 1 was really impressive, even though their offense really didn't have the best day, honestly, but they still won 40-0. That shows you how great the rest of the team was.
Yeah, I think the Cowboys lived up to some of my expectations. Fully agree that I think Micah Parsons could be a generational type player. I know that sounds maybe a little bit premature because of how young he is, but I think we're not alone with how we feel on that opinion. But um, I guess lived up to expectations outside of the score. I didn't see the Dallas Cowboys dominating that much. Shift things over to the New York Giants side of things. Not too sure. I'm not too familiar how you feel about Daniel Jones. Like I mentioned, a friend of mine is a Giants fan. I've been pretty critical of Daniel Jones in the past. He signs a big contract extension this offseason. I was pretty vocal about it on Twitter, especially with kind of in my group chat, kind of just with buddy bantering back and forth. Personally, I'm not too sure. I don't remember where Anthony Richardson went early. Who were the mid round quarterbacks? Because I know the Giants made the playoffs, so they were probably picking around maybe 20, low 20 or something like that. But who could have potentially maybe been a trade up candidate for them? That maybe I know ultimately we're kind of talking about the past year and it didn't go that way, but in my opinion, I was kind of harping on the Giants because of Brian Dable, my familiarity with Brian Dable, Joe Shane being former Buffalo Bills. I kind of like the roster as a whole. I just don't like the quarterback. And I think if they could find their quarterback, they'd be in better shape, especially within that division and with having to play the Cowboys, the Eagles. They're probably the third place at best, right? Also, Washington. You never really know about Washington. Can Washington be a little bit more competitive with Sam Howell this year? Maybe they're even fourth. So, what are your overall opinion? What's your overall opinion on Daniel Jones? And maybe just did you like that contract extension in the offseason?
I was gonna say I liked him a whole lot better when he wasn't making $40 million. Like he's just that classic quarterback that you shouldn't have given the contract to. He was fine to have on the rookie contract because rookie contracts are relatively cheap and you can deal with that. But I think at the end of the day, they made the big mistake and they ultimately gave him $40 million, which I guess is the going rate for basically like any like starting quarterback now. You can just say if I'm even like an average starting quarterback, I get $40 million. Like Daniel Jones has now really set the bar for that in the NFL. And so I'm really interested to see, how he plays going forward. Obviously not a good start under this contract. I just see him as a very low ceiling type of quarterback. I mean, he's a good athlete, a very good athlete. I think a lot of people didn't give him a lot of credit for that when he came into the NFL. But I think at the end of the day, he's just not a very good player in terms of pushing the ball down the field, which I think is something you have to do in today's NFL with all the explosive offenses. Look at it. In your own division, you have two really explosive offenses there with the Cowboys and the Eagles. So I think at the end of the day, like you said, they're miles behind those two teams, and you just have to look no further than this week.
Yeah, so I guess to close things out on week 1 of Sunday football, the Dallas Cowboys blow out the New York Giants 40-0. And unfortunately now, folks, that's the end of the podcast. We're not going to talk about the Buffalo Bills tonight. We are going to talk about the Buffalo Bills choked. I don't even want to say choke job because I don't know if we choked the game away. Just this embarrassment, I guess, is probably the best way to put this. Honestly, I guess rewind. Aaron Rodgers. We got the news this morning, folks. Out for the season, torn left Achilles. Shout out to Aaron Rodgers. I can't lie, Jason. I was quite the fan of Aaron Rodgers up until his tenure as a New York Jet this offseason. I'm not too sure about you, but I'm a big Pat McAfee guy. I listen to that almost daily at work, or maybe if I just catch the clips on YouTube at when I'm at home if I'm not able to catch it at work. Aaron Rodgers Tuesday. I was big into that. I was fully locked into the darkness retreats, freaking tuning in, waiting for his decision, hoping that he was going to retire. I thought he was going to retire, and he decides to become a New York Jet. And I just had to not kind of turn my back on Aaron Rodgers, but almost mute Aaron Rodgers until kind of his career is over. No offense to Aaron. I still love Aaron. I think he's one of the, as crazy as it sounds, maybe one of the most underrated quarterbacks in NFL history. I think he's up there. I know it kind of maybe sounds, I guess I'm speaking my age, but I personally, and forgive me, folks, I wasn't able to see Joe Montana, Dan Marino, obviously Jim Kelly, but for me, the three best quarterbacks I've ever seen in my life are Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Aaron Rodgers. And I think Aaron Rodgers is in that conversation, kind of without question. I think a lot of people would kind of maybe kick back on that conversation and say, Aaron Rodgers only has one Super Bowl. I would say, Peyton Manning only has two Super Bowls. He only has one more. So is that really a bigger difference? Just a really shitty thing to see for the league as a whole. To be honest, for probably the first quarter there, it kind of sucked the wind out of the game, I would say. I would think for Jets fans, until they won the game, it probably sucked the wind out of the entire game up until the fourth quarter, probably something like that. Unfortunately, probably around the time that the Bills scored, Steph scored the only touchdown of the night, I was pretty jacked up again and kind of no side of Aaron Rodgers, but kind of that was at the back of my mind at that point. I know it was kind of being talked about and shown on replays and stuff, Aaron being in the back and stuff like that, but I guess just what are your overall thoughts on seeing Aaron Rodgers go down? The Jets put a lot into this. Now, don't get me wrong, folks. They do have a fairly talented roster. I'm not the biggest fan of Zach Wilson, although he is 2-0 on the Bills in the last two meetings. But just how much do you think this dampens things for the New York Jets moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm just gutted for Rodgers. I think, first and foremost, this is a 40-year-old quarterback we're talking about, one of the greats, like you said. And I mean, I would put him right up there with, Brady and Manning as well in terms of all-time guys that I've seen. I mean, when you suffer an injury like this, an Achilles injury, at 40 years old especially, let alone like 31 years old, 25 years old, you're talking about a potential career-ending injury. So I really hope it's not that. I really hope he can get back on the field and at least to have one more NFL season. But I mean, with the way he's talked about retirement, especially the past couple of years, I would not be surprised if this is potentially it for him in the NFL with this long recovery that he's facing with that. So my thoughts go out to Aaron Rodgers, and really was sad for Jets fans, honestly. And I always say this: I'm a Bills fan, but I always say the Jets are probably my least hated team in the division, just because I think they've been through a lot in terms of their bad luck throughout the years, and this was just the epitome of bad luck. Didn't even complete a pass as a New York Jet. So I'm just so disappointed with what happened there Monday night. And I think in terms of the Jets going forward, they could still be a competitive team, as we saw last year with Zach Wilson just playing absolutely garbage football for a lot of the season. Mind my language. But at the end of the day, in terms of beating those good teams in the NFL, I almost said CFL, beating the good teams in the NFL, I think it's going to be a challenge for them going forward, because eventually somebody's going to figure out your defense. And I think offense is more replicable week to week than defense is. I think defense is more matchup based. So I think at the end of the day, they're going to have to find something in terms of their offense going forward, whether or not that's Zach Wilson taking a big step. Maybe he's learned from his past mistakes, but maybe they bring someone in here, but like a Carson Wentz or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to see what the Jets do. But if I had to make a prediction, I think this is probably a move that's going to take them out of the playoff race.
Jason, what do you think about this one? I love the comment. I know the guy. Get him on speed dial. Nathan Rourke. The Jets need Nathan Rourke. Blake, great comment, buddy.
A+.
A+ for sure. I would love and hate that all in one, because if Nathan Rourke came to the Jets, I feel like he'd lead them to the Super Bowl. That's how good that man is. But hopefully we don't have to worry about that. Back to Aaron Rodgers. Unfortunately, if maybe if people are basketball fans that are tuning in, Kobe Bryant, right? One of his last bigger injuries was that torn Achilles against Golden State. I want to say, I don't remember 2014 or 2015. I want to say it was a year or two before his final season, kind of the final maybe nail in the coffin, that kind of that final sign that maybe Kobe would that saw. I think kind of people that were around him, around NBA, kind of saw a different side of Kobe, starting to be a little bit more, I don't know if I want to say polite, but he was so, Mamba mentality for his career, right? And I think he really stopped to enjoy the flowers throughout that little bit of that last maybe year and a half of his career after that Achilles injury. Probably seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of, my career's. I'm not too sure if I'm ever going to be able to be the same again. Come back and kind of get through this at my age. I want to say Kobe was only 34 or 35 when he tore it. Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old. I don't want to slander the Twitter doctors out there, but it seems like the Twitter doctors out there are fairly positive that he's going to be able to make a return and come back to football. That being said, I think Aaron Rodgers' skill set is probably built to be, more of a stationary quarterback. He's probably more mobile than a Tom Brady, than a Peyton Manning, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of those guys. If he still has the brain and the processing ability of Aaron Rodgers, the cerebral assassin that he is, like a Tom Brady, like a Peyton Manning, potentially maybe he could. I guess in the era of football, though, it is a little bit tough. It is tough for pocket passers specifically to have some success. If you're not able to extend plays and get out of the pocket like Aaron Rodgers has been able to do for so long, why he's so great is extending those plays and creating outside of structure. I'm sure he would still be great as that pocket passer, but would he still be that Aaron Rodgers that we know and love him as today? And that the Jets signed, I want to say, 3 more years they're on the hook. They're on the hook for big money too, Jason, which is unfortunate situation, folks. Do not call me a dark, twisted person. I guess I think of the Grinch meme when he kind of starts to smile, smirking smile or whatever, but this is not anything to do with Aaron Rodgers. This has just kind of the Jets' luck and kind of how they kind of not are. They just kind of, they finally get a quarterback. They pay him this money and they draft Zach Wilson, and it's just it's a messy situation for the Jets. I shouldn't be making a joke out of it, but just they're in a tough situation here moving forward. Not to joke too much more, but they probably deserve that win last night, because I would imagine this season is going to be a little bit of tough sledding, and who knows how the Buffalo Bills season will go, because the Bills did not start out the 2023 season good, Jason, and that is where we're going to go next, talking about all things Buffalo Bills before we get out of here. We talked about everything week 1, folks, so if anyone's tuning in, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe. As always, support Jason and I's channel. You're tuning in on the Coast to Coast Gridiron YouTube channel right now, or you're on Hussey's Huddles, Jason's YouTube channel. Please be sure to support us, subscribe to both of our channels. A reminder, I am on the road to 100 subscribers. I believe I'm at 76 subscribers before we went live here. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel, folks. Help me get to 100 subscribers by, I think I said Halloween. That would be awesome. If not, all the support is appreciated anyway. So back to business, Jason. What I think probably Blake and a few others, I'm not too sure if they're going to be able to tune in live, but hopefully they're tuning in after, probably wanted to tune in for the most, and probably thought that I would be a little bit more flustered, a little bit more probably, I'd put something out there, clickbaity or something like that. I'd get on here and have some sort of big rant. I'm on the more optimistic side of things, Jason. I think that could maybe come back to bite me in the behind when maybe we at the end of the season. What are your overall thoughts, I guess, before I go? Personally, like I said, I'm on the optimistic side. How are you feeling about the kind of just debacle that the Buffalo Bills had last night, obviously losing to pretty much the Zach Wilson-led New York Jets 20-6, the overtime thriller, just a lot to get into, hopefully in a little bit of time. So just what are your thoughts, Jason?
Well, I think the Bills will ultimately be fine. They'll probably still be, 11, 12 win team this year, and they'll be okay. But I think, please subscribe. So cool. Sorry, just reading that.
Oh, no,
But yeah, I think the Bills will be fine this year. Ultimately, they'll win their fair share of games this year. But this is one of those games that you're going to look back on at the end of the season and say, why aren't we the number 1 seed in the AFC, or why aren't we the number 2 seed in the AFC? When seeding comes into play, or maybe it's to decide the division. Maybe Miami beats us out for the division this year, and we have to go on the road in the playoffs. I think that is something that's when you look at your schedule, you look at the games you could have won, and this is obviously one of the games that the Bills could have won. And obviously, we're only talking week one here, but really disappointing that they really just choked away this game a lot of the time. I think that really the turnovers were the big story in this one. I'm sure you'll get into those with your rant here, but I think at the end of the day, it was just mistakes by the Bills. I think that really cost them this game. I think they really had it in the bag. They really didn't have to be as over aggressive in certain situations that they were in this game. I think that even a couple of field goals late in that second half would have salted away the game, but ultimately they kept the Jets in it with mistakes, and that I don't know if the Seahawks will finish with a better record than the Bills. Seahawks didn't look very good on the weekend either against the Rams, but I think at the end of the day, the Bills will be a pretty good team going forward, but I think this game was just a missed opportunity for them. But quickly, I wanted to touch on the Jets' perspective of this. I think that it was actually a beautiful moment for them, actually. Like, I think it's interesting how it was the anniversary of 9/11, and just the fact that all the team went through that night with that injury. They just didn't mail it in. They just kept on fighting, and ultimately ended up winning and having a great moment for that fan base. But obviously, it doesn't make you feel better about the Rodgers injury. But I think that was a nice moment for that team.
Yeah, definitely a silver lining and definitely a positive. I know the camera was kind of cutting to some of those fans. I want to say one of them flipped the bird to the camera. They were probably going through it there, for majority of that game. And I would imagine they probably left that stadium probably, unfortunately, with Rodgers on the back of their mind, probably celebrating, jumping, just enjoying the win, right, with Jets fans around. I would imagine that it was a probably pretty good feeling there after the win, especially the way that they did it. They went in a walk-off punt return touchdown in overtime. I would imagine that place was electric probably last night, especially it was. I know I saw pregame. It was pretty live when Rodgers came out of the tunnel carrying the American flag. I would think probably after the Aaron Rodgers injury, it was probably pretty quiet up until they set off that punt return touchdown. Maybe that actually last thing I talk about from the New York Jets perspective before we talk about the Bills folks. Garrett Wilson was one of maybe the catches of the year so far. I know it's week one, but I love me some Trey White. I think he's going to be closer to the form that we know Trey White this season. He absolutely dogged Trey White. No offense to Trey White. He pretty much kept him. He pretty much held him off with one hand, said, little boy, I'm going to tip. I know it wasn't as clean as maybe he would have wanted it, but he held Trey White pretty much off. He went and tipped the ball to himself. As much as maybe it didn't look like that, he went and tipped that ball to himself, trying to get that soft hand to like coddle the ball, bring it back down. Unbelievable play from Garrett Wilson. Like I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned to you, Jason, I can't remember, it's blurring it all together, or my last podcast episode. I mentioned that I did a fantasy draft last week. I purposely took Garrett. I didn't take Garrett Wilson in my draft. I said I can't do it. I can't take a New York Jet. Look what he does. Should have done it. I should have put my pride to the side. With that being said, that'll close out all the Jets talk for this episode because F the New York Jets from here on out. Blake, you and I are not doing the post-game show either after you said that comment. But I feel like there's no other way but to place blame on the feet, on the shoulders of one Josh Allen. Now, that being said, I will defend Josh Allen for eternity. For he could do a lot wrong, and I would probably still defend. Obviously, 4 turnovers, I'm still defending him. He's brought me so much joy watching Bills football here in the past 3 years. The stuff that he's done, I've never seen this team do before. And as much as maybe that blinds me right now because of maybe that there should be alarms going off in the Tyrod Taylor era and maybe even the Kyle Orton, some of those EJ Manuel teams, I would get so bent out of shape because we were 7-9, 8-8 after losses and be like, man, we were right there. We had 3 plays didn't go our way. Now that we have Josh Allen and usually those 3 plays go our way and we win 10 games a year and we're in the playoffs every year, I have kind of put all I guess, kind of, I'm a little bit blinded, I guess you could probably say, to Josh Allen and maybe some of his, struggles and some of his weakness areas. Obviously, they show the graphic right away, and I'm super happy to see he leads the NFL in most touchdowns in the first 5 years of a NFL season, passing and rushing, I believe. That stat was that they placed on the Monday night. He also leads the NFL in turnovers since entering the NFL. And kind of, he said it before, right? His favorite quarterback growing up was Brett Favre, right? And I kind of categorize that to him being a gunslinger, right? And that's great. And the upside of Josh Allen is so high because, like I said earlier in the show, right? I think he's in that tier with Burrow and Mahomes at his peak, right? But when he has these games, he can kind of, I don't know if you want to say make a fool of himself, but kind of put lipstick on a pig a little bit, if you will, right? Kind of make us look a little bit foolish because people will hold us hostage of Joe Burrow's at least went to a Super Bowl. Josh Allen's only went to an AFC Championship, and most times people will totally gloss over. I know that we lost the game, but Josh Allen had like he did everything right for the Bills to win that night and to go to a Super Bowl. I would kind of lay blame on whether you want to call it special teams, defense, coaching, whatever you want to call it, for not being able to handle that 13-second situation. I think it's tough for Josh Allen because outside of Bills fans and personally me, right, that usually defend him, he gets criticized a lot for the turnovers and stuff like that, and usually it's a lot of the times that we're caught the interceptions, right, where it's like why did you kind of do that, and like the first interception was kind of like I was like, okay, I guess I kind of chalked that up as to a punt. The second one, I believe, was the second one to Gabe Davis or the third one to Stephon Diggs. I don't remember how they went, but the Gabe Davis one was he was behind Gabe Davis. He tried to throw into, I don't know what kind of zone it was, if it was cover two or what kind of zone it was. Sauce Gardner was kind of underneath. It was kind of like an under or out route or like a corner strike type route where Gabe Davis kind of got inside leverage and then went out. I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if it was a corner strike where he kind of rounded it up and kind of maybe like a corner more so than a 9-degree out cut. But he was, I'm guessing Josh was worried about Sauce underneath, and that's why he left it a little bit inside. But as you know, Jason, especially in the CFL where the field's a little bit longer, if you leave those far outside out routes, if you leave them inside, there's a good chance the defender's probably going to pick that off, and that's what happened in that situation. The Stephon Diggs one was going to be all right. Okay, it's another punt. We'll chalk that up, but it was just not needed. I believe he could have either ran or he could have just. It was just Stephon Diggs was 5 or so, probably a good 5 or 7 yards underthrown from that ball, so he didn't really have a good opportunity. Jordan Whitehead had the best opportunity of that football, so it was just super weird mistakes by Josh. But that being said, I really think this is not. I know it sounds like just kind of bias or just like I'm kind of blind a little bit here, but I just don't think that there's much to worry about. I think back to a few years ago when we lost to Ben Roethlisberger on his final wheels to the Pittsburgh Steelers on week 1. There's maybe a little bit of similarities. I believe that game was kind of a little bit the Steelers D-line kind of overwhelmed the Bills offensive line. I believe they got after Josh Allen quite a bit. I want to say TJ Watt had somewhere around maybe 2 sacks. He definitely had a forced fumble that I remember vividly. Yeah. This game maybe didn't. The defensive line didn't have the impact that maybe we thought with a Quinnen Williams, some of those guys that the Jets have up front. It really just came down to kind of Josh Allen just throwing the ball to the other team ultimately. So, not to let him off the hook. He played bad. There's no defending it, like I said. The one thing that I guess I would be a little bit concerned when it comes to turnovers, I think Josh has kind of lost a little bit of trust with the offensive line. It seems that he is a little bit he doesn't really it seems like in the past, I would say maybe since, I don't want to say the Jets injury, it seems like a little bit before that. I want to say maybe like mid-season last year. He seems to be a little bit antsy, and if his first read's not there, he leaves some clean pockets sometimes. Obviously, it's the NFL. There's not going to be the cleanest pocket on every play, but I'm curious how much that has to kind of come into play here. And then you look at it from a weapons perspective, Jason, and I guess that's where I'll turn things back over to you before we kind of close things out here. Stephon Diggs goes for 10 catches, 103 and a touchdown. And side topic, because I gotta throw it in. ESPN's, of course, leading with Stephon Diggs is a bad teammate, getting after Josh Allen and all this stuff. All this stuff that I don't know how you feel, Jason, because we never personally talked about this. My uncle texted me this morning. Shout out to my uncle. Hopefully he's maybe able to listen to the episode today. Texted me saying, ESPN's talking about Stephon Diggs and McDermott being bad leaders and teammates, coaches to Josh Allen. I'm not too sure if they were aware or if ESPN was watching last night, but they cut to the broadcast after Josh Allen's second interception. Stephon Diggs going over to Josh Allen, encouraging him. He did their little handshake. They did their double high five. So like I told my uncle, I don't pay attention to ESPN anymore outside of the Pat McAfee show, because no offense to those guys, they do have a great cast, but they are looking for clicks and for you to get outraged and comment on their things and blow out their posts and oh my God, we got 1,000,001 views because they know Bills Mafia is going to watch, and they know that Bills Mafia is going to react, because we always do. That is why I do not watch any of ESPN anymore. Not too sure how you feel about the whole Stephon Diggs situation, if he's kind of a distraction, that sort of thing. I tend to disagree. Another clip I sent my uncle, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady get called leaders for yelling at. I sent my uncle the clip of Peyton Manning yelling at Jeff Saturday to, effing block, Jeff, because he kept trying to change the play to run plays, and Peyton wanted to pass the ball. And Jeff and him are like going back and forth. And at the time, they're having a heated battle, right? An argument, right? But competitors do that and are able to come out on the other side of things better and realize that you can have those heated discussions at the time. Now, where I maybe would agree is maybe you can do that behind closed doors, maybe a little bit, where maybe you have those just heated discussions. But, Tom Brady has years of throwing tablets, yelling at Julian Edelman, all these things, and it's being a leader. But when Stephon Diggs does it, it's distraction. It's something different. I will turn it back over to you, because I think Stephon Diggs handled business. Do you think the Buffalo Bills have enough weapons that surrounded Josh Allen? Obviously, Dalton Kincaid drafted. I want to say he had like maybe 5 or 6 catches, not too much. He had 3 catches in the first half for 17 yards, and I think he had maybe 2 or 3 catches in the second half, but not for much as well. Maybe 30 yards overall. Kind of those just check down options. Didn't really seem maybe as much as we expected from Dalton Kincaid. Gabe Davis really unheard of outside of I think I remember specifically a second down conversion on a deep dig route. But the other weapons, Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy, Dawson Knox, James Cook, kind of what are your opinions on the surrounding cast around Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs?
Well, it really felt like in this game that, whenever they went to Diggs, that's when the team was having success moving the ball in the passing game, at least. And whenever they went to anybody else, that's when they were really struggling. And I think, maybe that's just the Jets defense. They do have a great defense. I think I would take the Jets defense over any defense in the NFL, not named the San Francisco 49ers. But I think at the end of the day, we have to be able to win those matchups, because we play this team twice a year. And that's a consistent theme we're starting to see. The Bills offense not being able to break through against this Jets defense in particular. And I mean, Stephon Diggs is always going to get his. He's always going to be, he can beat you in so many different ways. He can, beat you underneath. He can beat you over the top. So I think he's a guy that can get open with a number of different routes. But I think at the end of the day, you look at a guy like Gabe Davis, and I don't think Gabe Davis really has, he's not a very well-rounded receiver, I would say. I think he runs a couple of patterns really well, runs a good deep crosser and then, a good fly route. But I think at the end of the day, he's not that great in terms of, the nuances of a receiver, in terms of being like a true number 2 player. But he can be a superstar player in certain weeks. So I think at the end of the day, they do have the talent necessary to, win against a lot of defenses in the league, but it just, when they come up against some of these, truly elite defenses, I really wonder about the Bills, because the last 3 times that we've seen them, you look back at obviously the Jets this week, but then the Bengals playoff game, they didn't really look in sync there. The Dolphins playoff game, they didn't really look too much in sync there either. So, I mean, it hasn't looked great the last 3 appearances we've seen for them I think they're going to have a big bounce back against the Raiders next week. But I think at the end of the day, it's a lot of the things that are matchup based with this team. And we'll have to see if guys like Kincaid can contribute more going forward. But I think, as I was saying on the season preview show, very hard for rookie tight ends to transition into the NFL and make an impact year one. So interested to see his development. I think Dawson Knox is another guy we need to see more from. And of course, Hardy and Sherfield, more of those, surrounding pieces need to step up when, guys like Gabe Davis aren't really producing.
Yeah, I would definitely say the worrisome factor would be the reoccurrence of, I would go back a little bit further than even the past 3 games, Jason. I would think, I remember, Josh and a lot of Bills fans kind of want to not to even try to downplay the injury, because I think Josh did kind of battle a UCL injury, but Bills fans really try to harp on, Josh played with one arm for the half of last season when let's take it easy because he played. So if he had a UCL injury like he tore it like Brock Purdy and stuff like that, I don't know if he would have played. He's not superhuman. So he had an elbow injury for sure. He's dealt with this injury before. He dealt with it his rookie year, I believe, the same injury, kind of a UCL sprain, if you will. Had the brace, same sort of situation. I know he was on a pitch count at practice, that whole thing. But I want to say going back to week 9 or 10, that even when Aaron Rodgers and the Packers last year, that's kind of when it started. I want to say, we had a couple games against Detroit Lions last year when we had to win late. I didn't have the greatest showing there. Cleveland Browns as well didn't have the greatest showing there, but we won late. That was the second meeting against the Jets last season, I want to say, in the back half of the year. And that was we won, but it was a sloppy win. What other wins? And even some bad losses, right? I want to say the Vikings loss was in there. So some bad performances, right, where Josh fumbled the ball on the 1 yard line, that sort of thing. So it's unfortunate because, Jason, as you know, as any football fan knows, right, the quarterback has the ball in his hands in the most, right, and teams live and die with him. He's going to get praised the most, and he's going to get scrutinized the most, right? And that's probably the unfortunate side of things, but that's also kind of that's what you sign up for as an NFL quarterback. The money you get paid is to kind of put up with the criticism that you have to deal with on a week-to-week basis, whether you win or lose. You have to show up and smile and be happy about it and kind of be a professional, I guess, is the best way to put it. So to close out on the offensive side of thing and quickly just recap the defense side of things, I thought the defensive line showed well, Jason. Leonard Floyd, obviously, he was the one that was involved on the sack on Aaron Rodgers that left the game, but he had 1.5 sacks, if I'm not mistaken, was statted for a half sack. He probably should have been given 2 sacks ultimately, but 1.5 sacks. Greg Rousseau probably should have had a sack, but I believe Aaron Rodgers that was when Aaron Rodgers was in the game still. I believe Aaron Rodgers got out of 1 sack from Greg Rousseau that Greg Rousseau should have been having a stat on the stat sheet, but a fairly decent performance from the defense outside of Breece Hall kind of gashing them quite a bit. I want to say they had the 83-yard run from Breece Hall or something like that. Quite a big run from Breece Hall. That's something that's been a little bit worrisome from Bills fans for a little bit now is can the Bills stop the run, and then are the Bills safeties a little bit, or not even the Bills safety, Bills secondary, is it ready to compete with some of the high-powered offenses in the AFC and stop them when it matters most? So, Jason, buddy, it was an unfortunate way to start things because of the loss, but it was an exciting way to start things because we had some NFL football to talk about overall. And I think that's going to probably close out our very first week 1 recap show here on both of our YouTube channels. Very excited to do this all year, man. It's been I don't want to say a long off season, but it's been really good to kind of know that we have a long NFL football season to get ahead of ourselves here. A lot of storylines, a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things for Jason and I would imagine to go crazy on and to overreact and all that sort of good things. But that's what we wanted to create here and come every Tuesday, and hopefully everyone's able to kind of interact with us on the chat. That's the cool part of going live, and hopefully rant back and forth with us and kind of interact with us. We want to hear. Jason and I are both interested in your thoughts and interested in debate as well, right? We don't want to always agree, right, Jason? It's kind of I feel like that makes things interesting, right? You're agreeing all the time. It's kind of dull and boring, right? It's kind of I'm not too sure about Jason, but I fully embrace debate, and I think it's good for stuff like this, right? And kind of you can form a different opinion around maybe someone brightens opens up a different thought that maybe you didn't have before on a certain topic, and maybe you can change your opinion. So continue to stay active in the chat, I guess I would say, guys. We appreciate everybody for tuning in and supporting us as always. Jason, buddy, how was it? Week 1 of the recap show.
Oh, a lot of fun. Honestly, it's great to be able to finally really talk about the NFL, like on my YouTube channel specifically, because I've been covering the CFL for 3 years over there. Haven't really done any NFL content too much, so I'm really excited to do this weekly with you.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and you can catch Jason and I every Tuesday. For now, let's say 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But please pay attention to both Jason and I's social media, YouTube channels. Stuff does change. We're busy folks. So, stay on your toes. And like I said, follow the social medias, subscribe to the channels. And I guess that brings me to my last. Jason, this is me and Blake usually do this. Smash the like button, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share both of what Jason and I got going on. Jason and I both got a lot of good content coming out. I know I'm trying to stay busy on the short game, the YouTube short game. I know Jason's busy on the YouTube video game. Jason's pumping out around 3 videos a week, staying super busy. I don't know if that's going to go ramping up because of NFL season here. I know that's 3 videos a week for CFL fans. A little plug for any CFL fans that might be listening tonight. Expect some CFL coverage from Jason and I as well. Jason, that'll close things out for Week 1 of our NFL recap show. We will see you guys next Tuesday night. Thanks for tuning in.